Hello, I want to welcome you to Meacham Interviews. Today we have Tomas Morin. So, Tomas, what we usually do is begin by having you read a poem and talk a little bit about it.
I'd like to read the first poem from my new book, Nature Boy. New book, Patient Zero. The poem is titled Nature Boy. If I had enough cages to keep all the birds I've collected over the years, then I would have to open a shop, because there's only so much room in a 2-bedroom walk-up for 48 birds, not to mention the dancing bears and the frogs, or the different varieties of fish, the one species of flea. And I almost forgot the proud dogs and the lone mule, the profane one, who entered my life to curse its scribes and Pharisees. And maybe he'd let the mouse I found, forever dying at the end of a poem, ride on his back like a whiskered Christ. And if not, maybe my Yeti could do it, when he's not downtown working security at the store or teaching the parrots how to say brotherhood in grunt, and how to comb out the tangles and mud from his hair, whose sweat reminds me of that bearded collector of beasts with the ark who would have no doubt understood how I feel. That prophet of change under whose spell I want to confess that I'm a Christian of the Old Testament, that my grandfather hung all his goats upside down, their throats over a bucket, and slapped their chests like that other nature boy who strutted around the ring like a peacock with his feathered hair that stayed immaculate even on the nights he lost to our hero, Wahoo McDaniel, who never played the heel. He who hailed from the lost tribes of Oklahoma, who made us want to be chiefs so much we wore pigeon feathers and circled each other inside a green square of water hose until someone finally rang the bell that was never there, and we sprang toward each other like animals in love or at war.
Well, it's interesting how it goes from the instances of nature, more objective, to the more personal and autobiographical. How did it come about?
Well, the first sort of idea for the poem was I was reading Czesław Miłosz's poem, A Poor Christian Looks at the Ghetto, and he has a line in there where he describes himself as a Jew of the New Testament. And my mind often will flip a phrase, so I flipped it and I thought, well, like, what's a Christian of the Old Testament, and how can I get that in a poem? And then that got me to thinking about the Sephardic roots in my family, and I was talking to my mother, and she was telling me about the ways in which my grandfather would prepare animals before to butcher them, and she didn't know it, but he was preparing them kosher. He would, like the goats, he would drain all the blood in the backyard. And then I had this image of like him slapping the meat, and then that made me think of the wrestler, Ric Flair,
yeah.
The nature boy. And then suddenly, the poem started accumulating all these parts. And and the first part is actually, I counted up all the animals that have appeared in my poem so far. And somehow or another, there's 48 birds. I still don't believe it, even though I counted it and I put them in there. So that was like the sort of springboard for the poem, and then it went into all the other stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting how different kinds of vocabulary keep reappearing. I have an old T-shirt from the Italian poet Leopardi, because he has 39 mentions of moon in his poems, even different kinds of moons. Although his body of work is pretty small, and Merwin with his trees and rocks and stars and stuff like that. So, yeah. Who have been other influences? I know Miłosz was.
Yeah. Miłosz is one. Philip Levine has been huge. It was from him that I first learned that I could be anyone I wanted to be in a poem. He has this poem that appeared in his book, One for the Rose. It's called I Was Born in Lucerne. And everyone knows Philip Levine was born in Detroit. And when I first read that, I was like, oh, I can play around with the biography of my life and say I was born anywhere. I can be anyone I want to be. So that was really, really freeing. The poet I was one of my teachers in my MFA program, and I kind of learned the same. She reinforced the same kind of lesson. She wrote lots of stunning monologues. I have an ode to her in the book. Bridget Pegeen Kelly has been huge in terms of how to let the spiritual, not necessarily the religious, but the spiritual in into my work.
Yeah, it's an interesting way she does that too. It's just, it's not overt. It's just part of her way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
And yours too, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've all been important. Yeah, lots of people.
How did you get into writing in the first place?
It's kind of a long story. I mean, I wrote a little bit when I was in high school, just as parts of assignments, and then I took workshops as an undergrad. Those were really important. But the plan was never to be a writer. I actually have a Spanish major. That was my BA. So I started a PhD program at Johns Hopkins in Hispanic and Italian Studies. So I was going to be a Spanish professor someday, and I just got the poetry bug. I was living in Baltimore by myself, and I just started writing a lot of poems, and and then from there I made the jump. I decided to try an MFA program. And
Who'd you show them to first?
I had some friends there, but I didn't know whether, because the PhD program, like most of them, are fully funded, and it was a great school. I didn't know whether to take the risk and jump into an MFA program and try out this poetry thing. And a friend said, "Hey, you should send some poems to that guy, Philip Levine, you're reading all the time." And I was like, "Yeah, I don't think anyone does that. No one writes living writers." And so I just kind of like blew her off. Then a couple weeks later, I was really depressed, and I sent him a letter asking him if I could send him some poems. And he wrote me back and said something.
That's happened to him a lot.
Yeah. He said something I'll never forget. He said something like, "Poetry's been really good to me over the years, and the least that I can do for poetry is to give you my honesty. So send me 3 poems you have faith in, and I'll let you know what I think." So then he wrote me back a few weeks later after I sent him some poems, and he was very encouraging. He was hard. He was very honest, but he was very encouraging. So I thought, well, I'll give this thing a try. I ended up getting a master's in Spanish from Hopkins, and I thought, well, that'll be plan B. If this poetry thing doesn't work out, I can teach at a community college somewhere, adjunct, and make my way in that way. And so far, it's still working out.
Yeah, so far.
So far.
And so it's interesting. You really had a kind of mentor in Phil, but how do you think the way that he treated you or other people have treated you has affected your own teaching?
Treated me like in what way do you mean?
Well, I mean, Phil always had this almost like a moral obligation to deal with that, and that, well, for instance, the honesty, sometimes brutal honesty. Right. Is that the way that you approach things? And he was also extremely humorous too.
Right. And it's hard to be that honest and that funny at the same time. I think you either are or you aren't. I prefer kind honesty. I've actually had people that I didn't know, I've never met, who have actually emailed me in the same way that I wrote to Phil, who've emailed me and asked me for advice. And I've seen that as my way to pay it forward. But I mean, I'm always joking around with my students, and they learn real quick that I have a very dry, sense of humor, and that if I am teasing you and joking with you, then it's because I like you, and that's my way of connecting with them. But yeah, I mean, I feel like as a teacher, my first priority is their work, and to help them separate their feelings about the work from what the work needs, and to be an advocate for the poems and even sometimes the prose that they're writing. Because the students need, they need to find out what's working and what's not working. And at the end of the day, I always tell them, it's your piece. It's my 2 cents, but it's your piece. You can do what you want with it.
Is that the basic advice you'd give a student?
Yeah. I think finding that, it's taken me a lot of years to find that distance with my own work when I'm revising and composing something, and to not let my emotions, whatever emotions I have about it, emotional attachment, not get in the way of, of what it needs. When I first started writing, whenever a poem would want to start doing its own thing and go its own way, I would always feel like no, like I'm the author. Like you're going to do what I want you to do. You know, I'm in charge here. And of course, the poems were awful every time I did that. And it took me a long time to get to a place where I could just learn that that's the moment when the poem is actually coming alive. Yeah. And that's where it's actually smarter than I am. And I need to just buckle in, you know, and go along for the ride, you know. Yeah, so I try to, like, you know, through example, help students, you know, get to that place.
Yeah, it sounds like Charlie Simic has that line where he says, I wanted to take the poem to church, but it took me to the dog races. And you got to go to the dog races.
Yeah, you got to go to the dog races.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why don't you read another poem to end us off here?
So this one, it's a short one. The title is a Portuguese word, saudades, and it can be pronounced a few ways. Saudades, I've heard saudades as well. I didn't know how to pronounce it at first, so I went on the web and I found a website where, you know, you can plug in a word, and then you can hear the different pronunciations. And that first one, saudades, I kept replaying it over and over, and in my mind I was breaking up the two syllables, and after a while I started hearing sow, like a pig, and then dodges, and then that actually, as you'll find out, kind of like gave the birth, you know, to the poem, the seeds for the poem. Saudades. When that word, one part swine, one part evasion, first wobbled into my life, I was eating pastrami and hiding in my office from students. And I know saudade was in the air, as was the samba, and how it's almost impossible to translate either one. Nor should you, unless you've been a disciple of the rough grief that lovingly wraps you in its wings, which is warmer than one would expect. So much so that it's easy to forget for a moment something trivial like pigs aren't supposed to fly. Or that if you say saudades with enough pain and heart, the pigs of your past will come trotting out of the dark, doing their little sideways dance around you, shaking their hips to the drum in your chest until you forget what a frown is, or why we need them. And oh, they will remind you how delicious Carnival is, and how glorious it is to make the past present, and how easily one can sleep dressed in feathers.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
for
thank
coming
you.
in.
Thank you for having me.